We are back for another episode of Sea View Circle. This is our recap podcast where we review our favorite TV shows and movies of the past, present, and possibly the future. And along the way, we kind of talk about vintage styles and fashions, pop culture, film locations, sometimes which are lost to the decades. And we do all of this in service of our end goal of determining just how highbrow or lowbrow our viewing taste is. My name is Brady, and
I'm Doug.
How are you doing, Doug?
I'm good. I don't know if I've actually introduced myself properly in a few weeks. I am a real estate agent here in Los Angeles, but I am a lover of all vintage goodies, whether that be clothes, records, objects. I love thrift shopping. So that's kind of like my deal. That's stuff that I'm into.
I am a sometime actor, sometime DJ, and I also am a purveyor of vintage oddities, oddly enough.
I'm a DJ as well, and sometimes Brady and I even DJ together.
Yes!
We do high-level events or little parties.
Yes.
So we do have some fun stuff coming up.
We do. We're looking forward to it. We will tell you about it as it becomes,
as we get photographs.
As it's properly divulged.
Yes.
So for this season of our podcast, we are covering Yellowjackets Season 3. And today we're going to be covering the 5th episode of that Season 3. It's called Did Ty Do That? But before we get to that, we do have some postcards from the Edge. Would you care to indulge us, Douglas?
Sure. Now, this comes from TikTok.
Oh, my gosh. Can I just say, TikTok, thank you so much for all of your likes and your comments about our content over there. It's been really great. Thank you.
We appreciate anybody from TikTok who's come over to YouTube or Spotify.
Yep.
Please tell your friends because, we'd love to see those numbers that we get on TikTok transpiring and translating into YouTube views. So this comes from Alyssa on TikTok. It says, multiple characters interacted with Crystal when she was alive. I don't think she's imaginary, LOL, but I do think that some of the Yellowjackets think that Misty had something to do with her disappearance. Now, that is funny.
This was
we
on,
talked about this
this was on a short that we put up from last week's episode where we were talking about whether or not Van maybe had started the cabin fire, because when Misty was going through that whole trial and she kind of picked people out as to, who might have started the fire, she never came across Van. And then she suggested Crystal, and what was so weird is that nobody else around, nobody said anything, and it was like, why wouldn't anybody say, oh yeah, where's Crystal? It could have been her. Now there's another comment there.
Yeah, so now the next comment, also from TikTok, is from Courtney. She says, there's so much proof that Crystal exists, though.
Yeah,
it is a little weird how she seemed real at the beginning of the show.
But still a little, almost like a nymph or a fairy in the woods, that like a gnome, who's pops in and out.
It's just strange that they're not talking about her at
right. all. Because when they go back to that scene in episode 1 where they have the little pagan ritual, kind of a memorial, they talk about Jackie, they talk about Javi, and they talk about Shauna's baby. But they don't talk about, for some reason, Laura Lee or Crystal. So I guess you could see that they're memorializing them as sacrifices, Jackie and Javi. Not so much the baby, though. They didn't eat the baby. But so it's just weird that they've kind of just completely forgotten about Crystal and where she is. So the question remains, could Crystal have started the cabin fire because she was so pissed off at Misty? Could Javi's friend maybe found that body and dragged her back to the cave at the very least? Maybe Javi's friend started the cabin fire. Javi's friend said to Javi, don't go back there to those people. So maybe
that's a good
she did that. I'm saying Javi's friend is.
We don't know who it is.
I think Javi did say that she was she.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure.
So maybe that's the Hilary Swank character.
I'm starting to believe that that's the Hilary Swank character. There is a theory that Cabin Daddy had a child out in the wilderness, and then I guess maybe he died, and then she went out to live on her own. So maybe she is the person in the cave.
Okay.
Javi's friend. Right. Maybe that is who Coach Ben is talking to. We'll get to it because I do think there is a bridge.
Yes,
where this kind of makes sense.
There might be a bridge. I still have another comment.
Oh, okay. Okay, let's get into it.
So this one comes from YouTube. This is from @HaywireX666. They said, fantastic video. Truly, heart emoji.
Oh, wait. I was going to say, this is about the Extrajackets audit.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah.
So now it's got me thinking, where is number 15? maybe she died in the cabin fire or would be introduced in season 4. We talked all about in the Extrajackets how there were certain people that kept showing up. And number 15 seemed to be
kind of the one who is very consistent,
prolific and
all
consistent.
Through season 1. A lot of people actually over on TikTok for this particular topic, they were saying, oh, well, number 15 has to be Rachel Goldman, who was, the one who they all mentioned had died in episode 3. They're at the funeral. Number 15 can't be Rachel Goldman if she's actually at the funeral for Rachel Goldman.
Right. I mean, I think the thing that we were saying that could be really fun is maybe we'll try to do this special in search of number 15.
Yes.
And maybe
we can find out who
somehow
this is.
we can find
Somebody's
out
got to know who this actress is.
We're going to be relying on viewing audience. If anybody knows anything about this actor, whether day player, extra, whoever it is. Didn't we get a message though from somebody who was even on the crew, which I thought was
we did.
So maybe somebody like that could reach out to us. Would be great.
I have one lead. I'm going to look into that. Now, I did want to say one more little thing about the Extrajackets audit before we move on, but I do. If you are interested, go check out that episode. There has also been a question that perhaps in the team photos, jersey number 18 is Rachel Goldman, who is the one who died on the plane with the thing impaled through her. And I will say, I did have that on my spreadsheet. I think we failed to say that in the episode, that jersey 18 in the team photos could have been Rachel Goldman. I think she appears in the rally, like from the back, and I didn't look at that screenshot. So it is possible that Melissa is not jersey 18 and Rachel Goldman, who has similar characteristics visually, could have been jersey 18. So I want to say I'm okay with saying if I was wrong or if I have not all the correct information. I'm sure in today's discussion, there'll be a couple other things I got to say that we're wrong.
Well, anyway, I just want to say thank you, though, for all the comments and all the likes. And we want to remind you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can message us at seeviewcircle, SEEVIEW circle, for YouTube, or the email address, if you want to email us, old school, seeviewcircle@gmail.com.
Oh, I got a really good email, too. We're going to save it for another episode. So thank you so much for sending us those great comments. And I have to say, the support over the past week since that kind of Extrajackets content on TikTok blew up has been really great. Wonderful. Thank you very much. All right, moving into the episode, we have the writers for this as Elise Brown and Sarah L. Thompson, and the director of this episode is Jeffrey W. Bird. Once again, this is called Did Ty Do That?
Did Ty do that?
Which Ty? Which Ty?
Right. Teen Ty, adult Ty,
other Ty.
Other Ty. There's many ties.
Yes, and so many things that they're doing in these episodes.
I should have wore a tie today. I'm stupid.
I gotta say something. When you go on our Spotify and it lists it's like the timestamps of the subjects. Every time it spells tie as T-Y. I gotta try to fix that moving forward. I apologize. We know how to spell Thaisa and Ty. Trust me. All right. So moving into the episode, who do we see first?
Well, we see Misty. And he's got his homage to Misty. We see Misty is at the coroner's office, and it's very solemn. And she's identifying Lottie.
It is interesting that I guess the father wasn't designating who the body was because he's got some issues, as we will later find out.
He's got some dementia.
Now, what do you think, though? Why do you think they did not have Simone Kessell there for that? And
I don't know, but it was a really interesting kind of montage where you saw Misty as adult Misty looking at Lottie, and then she saw Lottie as young Lottie, and then Misty was young Misty. It was just a very solemn situation, and you could see that Misty was very upset. And then magically there's this guy there who
a fellow citizen detective, someone who's maybe not as sharp as Misty, right?
They have a conversation where Misty brings up, where are her personal effects?
Yeah, she wants a little personal effects so she can start investigating this murder that she believes it is. And of course he says he can't give that to her
unless she's family.
Right. But then she, of course, bribes the guy by saying that she has evidence that he has been fencing some of the stolen jewelry from the dead bodies in the morgue. This is very much like Only Murders in the Building, by the way. This happened in one of the seasons. I love the line where Misty says, she goes, "That vintage watch made a killing on eBay, huh?" And the way she delivered it, to me, sounded like Valerie Cherish from The Comeback. I don't know if that was the reference, but that's what it read to me.
She says that she's going to turn him in. And so he gives her a bag of possessions.
Not only does Misty get some of Lottie's personal effects, but then when the guy goes off to go retrieve them, she has a little plastic baggie and she clips some hair samples and some stuff underneath the fingernails.
Yeah, she takes the sample from underneath the fingernails and she quickly leaves with that. So she gets what she wants, as always.
Yes.
You don't mess with Misty.
No. So I think it goes right into the next scene where she confronts the other Yellowjackets with the news that Lottie is dead. And this is an interesting scene.
Yeah, I thought it was weird because Shauna seemed very shocked.
Yeah.
Ty didn't seem shocked at all. She was just like silent.
She was hard to read, that one.
Yeah. I think Van had a reaction.
Van, to me, looked the most guilty. That was the reaction I saw in her face. But it's hard to say. It's really hard to say where they're going with this. And they do a nice job there of giving the Yellowjackets a reason to believe that it was Misty, right? Because wouldn't Misty be upset with Lottie after everything that happened with Natalie? Yes. Now, as the viewer, we know that Misty didn't do it because Misty was shocked when she saw it on the Citizen Detective board and Walter clued her in on it. So
but they showed again that Shauna is still really not trusting Misty at all and thinks that Misty's behind everything.
Right.
In the last episode, we're seeing that she was wrong about it, but she's still sticking by her guns. It's very weird.
Yeah, she's very stubborn, that Shauna.
She sure is.
I love how Van says, it's very on brand of you, Misty, to come here and tell us about Lottie's death and you're investigating it, if it had actually been you who did it. you know?
So Shauna comes out and says, oh, I just saw her the other day. And then she brings back the tapioca duty.
Right, that whole situation where she got locked into the freezer.
She gets locked in the freezer. And then she also mentions that, Misty, you were gone.
Yeah.
You left.
Right.
So
where were you?
Yeah, where were you?
Giving everybody the opportunity to be there for this situation with Lottie, and we'll get into more of that later. There's another great line when Misty's like, she's so upset that they think she's the one who did this. She storms out.
Yeah, she storms out, and then it's like, it's her house.
Did Misty just storm out of her own house?
I didn't clock on immediately that
Caligula's cage was in the background.
Oh, okay, all right, I missed that. It was just so fast.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was funny.
Cute scene. I would say that most of the adult timeline in this particular episode does provide ample comic relief, which I think as the audience viewer is needed in an episode where we were convinced we were going to see some pretty terrible things happen. And we did see some pretty terrible things happen.
I will say, too, on a whole, this episode seemed a different pacing. Yeah, again, more comic relief in a lot of those adult timelines. And then, of course, the teen timelines were really intense.
Heavy, intense.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's later that same day or maybe it's the next day, but Shauna is basically tailing Misty as she's going out potentially to look for more clues. And then it's funny because somebody immediately starts tailing Shauna.
Yeah.
And the license plate says, not Walter.
Oh.
But the windows are all really dark, so you can't really see who it is. But of course, we know it's Walter if the license plate says not Walter. So Shauna's like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And then in similar fashion to season 1, Walter bumps into Shauna.
Yeah, rear ends
her. And they get out of the car and she's like, oh my God, what are you doing? Right? There's this kind of power play between the two. We can't really mess with Shauna, right? But, Walter is a good adversary.
His MO is that he wants to be the chief investigator of Lottie's murder because he would like to try to win back the affections of Misty.
Right.
And he feels like he has to do this because this is what she loves.
Right.
So he thinks that this is the way to get back in her good graces.
And certainly they were on the case in the last season and they worked together really, really well. But then Shauna seems to wonder, wait a minute, did you murder Lottie just so you could get this whole ball of wax rolling here?
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting. And I think that Walter's very sort of clued in on the fact that Shauna might have a motive as well. And so when they're kind of cagey back and forth, he suggests that maybe they work together.
Right, which is really a fun plot point.
Yes.
As we will see.
Yes, it goes in a great direction. But first we see Citizen Detective Misty heading to the location of Lottie's death. And we find out that these mysterious tunnels were simply just the bowels of a New York hotel.
Right, where her father lives.
Yes.
In the penthouse.
I love this because you and I met working at a hotel, a boutique hotel not far from Columbus Circle in New York City, which looked amazing and dazzling when you're there in the lobby going up the escalators. Everything is super, super chic. And then you go in behind the scenes and the place is a crumbling dump.
Right. The place where we worked, what was so crazy is there was a 1920s swimming pool down in the basement that was not filled with water. It was like a cesspool filled with garbage.
I always considered that area, those areas of the hotel as being like it's like a Hollywood backlot. You know, you see that facade and then you go behind it and it's just like there's no care and attention put into these, you know, I can't remember what they call them.
It's backlot.
You know, the hotels have to work so hard to refurbish the front of house. That's what it is. Back of house, front of house. They have to work so hard to refurbish those areas because there's so much wear and tear. So they never have time to worry about the back of house. And it always looks so crummy, like these tunnels where Lottie was. So Misty goes down there in her jacket and her cat sweatshirt and she sees the walls. She sees there's maybe some scratches.
There's like some nail scratches.
So she grabs the paint samples to see if they match what she found underneath.
And it looks like pretty immediately. She's like, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So she's on to something.
So then she goes upstairs into the lobby. And this is really interesting. I tried to do some research on this, but I couldn't find anything. On the door of the glass door in the lobby, it says the Janeway. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to find, was there a hotel in the Vancouver area called the Janeway? I couldn't find it.
I'm just thinking Captain Janeway
from
Janeway Star Trek.
From Star Trek. What's the what's I'm not really familiar.
She was also Mrs. Columbo.
Oh, yeah, she was. Maybe
Mulgrew.
that's the connection.
Maybe that's it.
Maybe that's the connection.
Kate Mulgrew, Captain Janeway.
Yeah, Mrs.
I bet
Columbo.
you that's a connection.
That's clever.
Ooh.
Oh, I love that. If that's what that is, that's really, really good.
Okay.
I couldn't find the Janeway even in New York or anything. But what is really funny is that the Janeway really is the Arconia. Right? It's only murders in the building again.
Right. It is only murders in the building. But as anyone who knows, who's ever lived in a building like that if you want to get information, you talk to the doorman. The doorman, because the doorman knows everything.
Yes.
So what was great is, I think the doorman's name was Cliff. And Cliff reveals a lot of information to us. We find out that she actually lived at this hotel. I guess originally 1978 and 79 is when they first moved in. So she would have been like a baby at that point. Remember that we put the connection that this steps where she's died is what she saw in her vision. But what's weird is if she grew up there and as a kid, wouldn't she have explored all those weird areas like already?
I don't know.
But why, you know, I mean, I know if it was me, I would have explored everything. As a kid, you would know all the weird.
Well, maybe
so maybe she's
there is
familiar.
a connection to it, though.
Yeah, maybe.
You know what I mean? Maybe that is a connection. Maybe
it's her happy place.
Right. Maybe she was there to do some sort of ritual that we have yet to see because there's all those candles. I don't want to ruin too much of what's going on here with the rest of the season. I did see a little interview piece from Simone Kessell that just said, they asked her, will you be back at all? She says, you can look forward to seeing me for sure in episode 10 when it is, explained what actually happened.
Okay.
So
right.
I think we're going to see some more of those pieces fitting together, but I really did enjoy this. Again, this feeling of only murders in the building. And it is interesting to find out. We just talked about it, I think in the last episode, wondering what had happened to Lottie's parents. And here we find out that he is living in the penthouse of this building. We later find out that Lottie, after she got out of the institution where she was rehabilitating, that she went to go live with him, which then, Shauna questions, because why did she then pop up on my doorstep saying she had nowhere to go?
Right.
Well, we know why, because we know that Lottie wanted to get into Callie's head, right? She was impressed by Callie. She wanted to see what's going on. And I do think there's an interesting correlation between Shauna's first child right out in the wilderness. Lottie was always talking to it in the womb. She kept referencing it like, this is our baby.
Right.
So for whatever reason, she's into this, into Shauna's children.
Well, we'll get into it. The next scene that involves, say Misty, is she is at the door of the penthouse. and she's trying to get access. She brings like chocolates or something.
Yeah.
She gives a
Rugula.
That's it. But then she makes this excuse that like she had picked up a package for me. Is there a way that I can like
and there's
out the place real
with
quick?
The kind of the nurse or the maid or whatever and Mr. Matthews, where it becomes very clear to Misty, she's very perceptive, that he doesn't have all of his faculties with him. Maybe it's dementia, maybe it's some Alzheimer's going on here. So she knows she can kind of take advantage of this situation. And he allows her in, which is crazy.
Yeah.
She quickly spots the jacket. Right, so she goes over and she sort of backs herself up against it.
And she reaches into the
now. There's
coat
a really,
pocket.
really interesting moment here. Okay, when Mr. Matthews says that quite simply, Lottie just fell down the stairs.
Right,
and then Misty, I don't know how it comes up, but somehow she maybe put some suspicion on there. And Lottie's father says, "Oh no, I made sure at the police department that it would never be looked at anything other than an accident."
Right, and I think he mentions a guy's named Mark. I told Mark.
Yeah, she said something like, he won't get this donation or whatever if he, renders it anything other than an accident. Right. So that leads me to believe, did he do it? I mean, right in that moment, did the father do it?
Maybe he just doesn't want the attention generally because he's a very wealthy guy.
Right.
I mean, that he's connected.
Right, and he did say often like how he always couldn't really relate to Lottie and everything that was going on with her intentional community and so on and so forth.
So we do find out, though, in a moment after that she pulls out of the pocket a withdrawal slip, and it says something like $50,000. That's what she was doing when she left the bank in the previous episode before she died.
Right, and this kind of matches up with the Tais situation. Like Tais is a suspect because remember she had the cash. Whatever. People can have cash; it's not that big of a deal. But there's that tie in there, no pun intended. But I'm thinking now again, if there's suspicion thrown on Mr. Matthews, maybe there's now suspicion thrown on this nurse too, because she would have had her hands in those pockets. It's kind of weird. They're opening it up to a lot of possibilities.
Yeah,
here.
but let's face it, it's gonna be somebody who if we haven't
seen
them, it's gotta mean something. So doesn't Misty starts going around to other rooms, and then all of a sudden, she meets the two
dynamic
duo of Walter and Shauna posing as internet repair people.
Tech nerds. It's hilarious.
Geek Squad or whatever. Squad.
They look fantastic in their little caps and their little ties.
I wanted to be the Geek Squad, but I just could not find the right outfit, and I'm so sorry.
I know. There's a quick turnaround. I had to plan this a couple weeks in advance, to be honest.
Yeah, I tried this morning to find something that looked like what Walter was wearing, but I just couldn't find it in the local thrift store, and we were running out of time.
Yeah.
So
I will say that this sequence here, actually there's a couple sequences where we see Walter's vulnerability, and this plays out here too. And I do think that Elijah Wood just look so handsome in this episode.
Oh, those baby blue eyes.
I never thought he was really cute.
No, I did not. I'm not a fan of
Lord of the Rings.
Wasn't he? He's a hobbit or something. I was not a fan of that.
Now, do you know that actually he and Christina Ricci actually appeared together before in The Ice Storm? Remember that movie?
Oh yeah, I remember that.
1997.
Yeah,
they play some of the children of these swinging couples.
We saw him on the corner one time too.
I did.
I think I was with you.
Okay, he's handsome.
We were in Venice or something.
He looks handsome now. He's got that little 5 o'clock shadow. I think he looks good. But I guess what I was trying to say is that there are moments where you can see the vulnerability in his eyes. They get all kind of glossy whenever he's talking about Misty, because Misty's making it very clear she is not interested in this. What are you doing? Why are you trying to do this?
Yeah, and in fact, she's getting jealous.
Yeah.
Of the Shauna.
Yeah.
So it's like, why are you with Shauna?
Yeah.
Because of course Shauna is her nemesis right now.
Yes.
Time.
I will say that Misty has never really been that nice to this guy. Like even in season 2, there were some scenes where I was like, Misty, because this guy is a really great guy. I think we still don't really know, right?
We don't know exactly.
but I think that they're obviously like kind of perfect for each other. But Misty is always going to be team Yellowjackets first. That's the connection she wants to hold on to, because that's what she never really had when she was younger. So it leads me to believe, like, why does Walter keep going back? Like, is he just like a masochist?
Oh, probably.
This is like the ultimate Kimmy, Kath and Kim Treat him mean, keep him keen.
Treat him mean, keep him keen.
Thank you. I needed that.
I love the line that Shauna said is, there's a new sheriff citizen in town, which I thought was really funny how it's like, okay, she's getting in on it.
I love the moment when Mr. Matthews can see that they all know each other. So he questions, how is this possible? And then Shauna says, oh, yeah, we did her internet too. She's the one with all those adult site viruses.
Right. And then I thought what was really funny is Misty then offers that, like, no, you have to go outside to do the wiring. And then you see
they're playing these games.
Right. And then the father gives this little like smirk and is like, you listen to her.
Yeah.
You guys go outside.
You guys go outside
So
now.
he was Team Misty.
Because she wants to look around. She's looking around for more clues, obviously. And they're trying to look around for more clues. They've also, I guess, hacked into Lottie's phone or computer. And so Misty can see that they're getting all that information. And she's like, oh, please, hacking the computer. That's like, snooping 101. But Walter knows there's value in that information. So he says to Misty, we can all join forces here. We're going after a common goal. And she says, I'd rather jump out of the window than join forces with you. And that's one of those moments where Walter has those teary, glossy, big blue gray eyes.
What about, there was a line I wrote, but I can't remember who said it, but penetrating the system. And
yes!
What was it?
So the battle of the citizen detectives rages on, and Walter and Shauna are kind of going over the results of this hack, and Shauna's totally bored. And Walter can see this. He says, I can show you how I'm penetrating the system.
She comes back and says something like, that's just too much.
She's like, please don't. That's gross.
Yeah.
And then again, she's kind of confronting him like, why are you doing this if obviously it's not working? Misty is not responding well to this. And Walter says, no, I know Misty really well. I know what'll make her toes curl. And again, Shauna is just repulsed. Again, what's the Kath and Kim? Revolting.
Yes, revolting.
So what's really interesting is then there's this moment, there's like this challenge where Walter takes off his cap and he pulls out a hair follicle.
Oh, yeah.
And he says, you can use this as proof that I did not do this. And he says, I lay down that gauntlet if you give me one of your hair samples.
And she doesn't want to do it.
She doesn't do it. And then he sort of like says this line that's sort of threatening. He brings up mutually assured destruction.
Right.
Now, do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that from another.
Shauna used those same lines to Callie. I believe it's in Blood Hive, season 1, when they go to the rave and they come back and Callie has seen that she's been with Adam. And so Callie says, I'm going to tell Dad you were with some dude.
Right.
And then she says, well, you know what that's going to do, don't you? It's the mutually assured destruction.
Okay.
So that's interesting. And she definitely clocks on. Shauna clocks on that Walter has said that.
It is weird because how would he have heard that?
Yes.
But anyway.
She still does not give him the hair sample. So what does he do?
Well, she stupidly leaves the hat there and then he just picks up the hat. I was waiting for it and like, oh, he's just going to pull a hair out of that. Of course, there was a hat.
There it is.
A hair in the hat. So you're good to go.
Yes, exactly. Who needs a needle in a haystack when you got a hair in a hat? Yeah. Meanwhile, as this is all going on at the Arconia... I'm sorry, the Janeway.
The Captain Janeway Hotel.
We have Van and Ty enjoying a nice lunch out. But it doesn't go so well because obviously Van is starting to think about what Misty has just said. And she recalls back to their beautiful little date out in Central Park.
Yeah.
Well, let's be honest. Earlier in the day, they were ready to kill some random stranger because he had picked up the green card on the street.
But there's like an hour gap.
Right. There's this hour gap because Ty says to Van, I'll meet you in an hour. And so Van is like, what did you do during that hour?
Yeah. And Tais makes just some kind of weird excuses like, oh, well, I had to go do this, that, and the other and make sure I had to go to the bank to make sure I had money so I could pay for the coach and all that stuff. Yeah. So it seemed very evasive.
Yeah. And Van is definitely picking up on it. I'm really curious as to why Van is, obviously they have a great relationship. We see that in this episode when they are in their teen years. It's that bond is really strong, but still Ty is a handful. Meanwhile, there's a phone call and it's Simone, the wife.
So finally, we got Simone is coming back.
Okay. We need to talk about this Simone thing, right? I was really excited to see Simone back on screen, as well as Sammy. And I kind of knew that Sammy was going to be on the episode because the actor had posted something kind of cryptic
a
couple days before.
Spoiler on Instagram.
He said something like hashtag Vancouver, and it like showed him kind of dancing. He must have been wearing the same outfit that he wears in the episode. I didn't really verify that. But I was really happy to see Simone again and get some sort of closure on that. But I still feel there are some questions that are left unanswered. Like, she was in a coma, I guess, after that accident. How did she recuperate? What's going on here? And it made me think of the moment in season 2, I'm not sure what episode it is, where Tai goes to visit her in the hospital and she has drawn the symbol onto Simone's hand.
Right, I remember that. And it was really like, ooh, freaky.
I thought of it, and then it made me think of this great TikTok post that I saw a few days ago, and you should all check it out.
Oh, yeah.
This is from a gentleman named Ty Wilson, another Ty. Ty Wilson has this great theory about the symbol and where it comes from. And I don't want to get into all of it. You should just go see the post. But I will say this, that I guess during the Great Depression, people obviously were out of jobs. They needed money. And so a lot of times there'd be kind of vagrants who would, ride the rails, going from town to town, looking for opportunities, looking for a place to stay.
And a lot of people who ended up going to British Columbia as well, I think they said that they were brought there for jobs, or then the jobs dried up and then they were kind of like stranded.
Right. And so they were kind of even looking for just basic shelter. And so they came up with this thing called, well, I guess they call it the Hobo Code, where these people would leave symbols, whether it's in the shelter or at a place where there might have been a job opportunity. And they would leave the code that would say, this person has a gun, or there's loud barking dogs here, so you're not gonna be able to sleep here, or this opportunity's all dried up, you should move on. And so this guy does a great job of kind of showing each part of the Yellowjacket symbol and how it relates to each of these different things.
And it was interesting because a lot of those symbols look very similar. They're geometric.
Very similar.
So I thought that was really a cool
Now, a
post.
couple of episodes ago on our podcast, when we were talking about season 2, we were wondering if the Yellowjacket symbol was like a sign for a trap, right? These were the areas at the gorge where Crystal falls off or where Tai almost falls off. That is a trap. And if you look at the concept of the Hobo Code, and that maybe even Cabin Daddy was one of these vagrants who's coming through, you could put the symbol in the attic on the floor as, we're done here, move on, don't stay here. No, nothing good is going to come of this. And in a way, it could be seen as a trap, because even Coach Ben, when he goes into the cave, there is the symbol. And where is he discovered and found? As a trap in the cave. There's also, of course, this noxious gas in the cave.
Right. So maybe it's meant to be like, this is a no-go zone.
Exactly. This way I see it is, if you come to one of these places, don't stick around. Because what happens to the cabin? It goes on fire. It's a trap. Everywhere that the symbol has been a trap. And if you look at Simone's hand and you think of Tai putting that on her hand, she's like, I'm done with this opportunity. I'm done.
Ooh, okay.
Move on.
All right.
And that's what we see happening in this episode, because they go to the park. They see Sammy. We don't see what the conversation is until the very end between Tai and Sammy, because they're focusing on the little interaction between Simone and Van.
Oh, that was really funny. The Simone Van interaction was like, she's like, oh, you're her. And it was like, oh, yeah.
Of course, her. That moment is going to happen. It was so delicious.
Great.
I needed that.
Great. Yeah, it was great. It was short but sweet.
Yeah. We didn't see at the moment, though, what Sammy had said, but you could see that he was very disturbed. And then later on, there is a scene at Tai's house, and she's in Sammy's bedroom with Van. And it is then revealed that I think Sammy said something like, do you not want to be my mommy anymore?
What if Sammy is sensing that she is currently other Tai? That's what I was thinking. Like, is this shift happened where, because remember, now it's like not happening anymore, kind of like what it did in the other timeline.
Right.
So maybe what Sammy is sensing is that this is not the same person anymore.
I agree. Tai says, oh, I will always be your mommy, which that's what scared him.
Yeah.
He's like,
Yikes. Eek. She's gonna bite me.
So then, in that moment, Tais says to Van, I think it's time to move on. I don't want to live in this place anymore. And she says it in a very menacing tone. It's very other Tais energy.
Yeah.
And so I don't know exactly why that plot point needs to be there, that she's leaving the house. But I think the bigger picture here is what you're saying, is that maybe now they're one and the same, and Tais is just able to kind of consciously switch back and forth. And we see this now in the teen timeline. At the beginning of the episode, they're all sitting around a table, the Yellowjackets, and they're wondering, well, what are we going to do with Coach Ben? And they come to the determination that they're going to do a card draw, because that's the way they handle everything, the poop bucket or the next murder. They're all still kind of cagey in their belief of whether or not he did it. Right. Obviously, they don't really believe that he did it.
In that scene, you had the conflicting opinions of how he should die. And it's like, Shauna was still like, well, we're going to burn him alive. I don't know.
Notice Lottie shows the drawing again. Right. Travis's drawing, and they don't really seem interested in that, but I do think that's going to be a huge thing going forward. We're going to get to that.
I don't know who suggested the firing squad. Was it Natalie?
I think it was Natalie. Okay. She felt that would be the most humane and maybe the best for the person doing it too, I guess. So there's a card draw as to who is going to be the person shooting in the firing squad.
And of course, who picks it?
We know it's going to be Tais because of the episode title.
Did Tais do that? So Tais is chosen to be the person who's going to have to shoot Coach Ben dead.
Right.
And, of course, she's having a hard time trying to get to grips with that. So Van is coaching her and saying, well, maybe what you should do is, well, first they try practicing at a tree with a smiley face.
And there's that moment where she calls back to Coach Ben, teaching them all how to shoot the rifle.
I know.
It's terrible.
Yeah, but you can see that she's clearly upset.
Yeah.
And so then Van is like, well, maybe
this is where
family evoke evil Tais.
Yeah, this is where Family Matters comes in. The title of the episode, Did Tais Do That? Because she says, much like on Family Matters, when Steve Urkel, this nerd, was able to transform into Stefan Urkel.
See, I don't know that show, so I didn't get that reference, but
So she uses that as a metaphor that there is the other Tais, and they do address the fact that other Tais hasn't really been around recently, that she's not been sleepwalking and things have been better. But so they're trying to figure out a way to invoke other Tais, and in fact...
Well, they figure out maybe there's a way to do it, but it doesn't work, but it's still...
They do two methods on camera. They fool around, right?
They fool around on a tree.
And then a little rabbit is snared. And so they wonder maybe if killing that and like taking in what Lottie's always said about, these sacrifices, maybe that will invoke other Tais.
Spill.
They did not need to show that on screen.
No, I was upset. And you know what? Our cat was upset too.
Our cat could not look.
She did not like. I had to hide her eyes from that. Because, we always kind of joke that she's a little bunny. She does not like that.
Right. And she is normally a Yellowjackets fan, by the way.
Yeah. Anyway, that part was kind of scary. But both of those things did not work. They did not make Tais turn into evil Tais.
Right.
So,
but what's really interesting is that later on, when she is actually faced with the task of shooting Coach Scott, she is able to do it. She is able to connect. And I'm thinking, really? Was that really other Tais, or was it just Tais?
I don't know, but she did have tears in her eyes.
She did have tears in her eyes.
She was getting really tearful at first. She looked very upset at that point.
Yeah, she did. It was upsetting. That was an upsetting scene. We will get to it in a moment. Let's rewind back a little bit to the beginning of the episode, which is actually my favorite scene of the whole episode. In an episode that had a lot of really good scenes, actually. Well, maybe my favorite scene was the second scene with Coach Scott. The first one was with Akilah. I thought it was so sweet. These are the two people that the fandom right now is really rooting for. If you go on any of these social media things, people are
Team Akilah, Team Ben.
They really are. They're really showing that these are the good, the only people that are good out there, or not crazy.
It's true.
So to see them together, that was really nice. And Coach Scott is kind of giving her advice about this kid goat and what they're going to need to do to, I guess, wean it or
because he said he had some experience when he, like with his family, right, was taking care of, I don't know if it was cats or something like that.
He then asks Akilah, so what are they going to do with me? And she says something like, I don't know, they didn't tell me. Oh, it was so sad. Like you can see like kind of like her pecking order too.
It was
in a way.
very sad. But then we do find out what they're gonna do with him later, because then Misty shows up with this delicious looking
final meal.
Looked like a grilled sea bass or something.
Yes. Oh gosh, if they've got fish out there, these beautiful fish, that means they're out there fishing.
And let me tell you something. They could be catching all that fish, and they could smoke the fish and have it all the rest of the year.
Right. And even in the winter, if winter comes around again, which we know it does, they could do ice fishing carefully.
I have seen videos on YouTube. Okay. No, I mean, I have seen this where, they talked about in the ye olde days and I don't know, it was medieval times and stuff like that, but that's what people would do. They were prepared. Up for the
winter.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what they should be doing, but who knows?
They should be doing that instead of having trials and having firing squads and doing all this crazy stuff and going into caves. They should
But you know what? Everybody, sometimes you just like a little steak.
Or a juicy butt.
Juicy butt.
As Misty had referenced
in
season 2.
Juicy
Coach's
butt.
Juicy butt.
But speaking of juicy butts, let's talk about
the
Ben
scene.
And Misty.
This scene was so touching.
It was touching. So at this point, Misty reveals that they're going to come at dusk and they're going to shoot him. So this is like his last supper. And so he is just freaked out, of course, and upset.
And Misty is also obviously upset. She has to come to terms with what's going on here and who this guy was, who he meant in her life.
She said he was her first boyfriend.
And first amputation.
At the same time.
It is such a touching moment when she goes up to hug him. She wraps her arms around him and she says goodbye to Coach Ben. And even Coach Ben says goodbye, Misty. Now, in that moment, he's sort of maybe not as emotional in a way, or fearful. He doesn't seem so fearful. He seems more emotional in that moment. That goodbye, stoic. Because later on, he is not ready to give up once we finally come to the firing squad. We're going to get to the firing squad in a little bit, but before we do, we got to talk about this Akilah situation.
Yes.
So, once again, our pusher, Lottie
the pusher.
Coaxing again. You gotta go back to that cave. We gotta get you.
And that's just a very convenient plot point that they're going back to the cave with Travis at around the same time that the firing squad thing is happening. But like, we've got to go back to the cave. We've got to get you back to that point where you have the visions. So they go back and they bring a rope and all this stuff.
And Akilah is definitely. She's not so sure. She's very uncertain, like, should I be doing this?
And you also see that Travis is unsure.
Oh, Travis, unsure. I'm sorry. I was so upset with Travis at this point because to me, when they can see that Akilah is very trepidatious about this, and then Lottie goes to Travis and says, you did see in your vision that they want to talk to her, right? And he's like, yeah,
he seemed very like, obviously he was drunk when that other stuff happened.
Well, on mushrooms,
right? Or on mushrooms or something.
So he is, to me, sort of unreliable. I think that he's covering his butt at this point, and it's making me very upset with this character. But then as we get into the cave, he definitely does kind of switch, and now he is more of a protective mode because Lottie is like hardcore. She's like, let's get this girl under the spell of these noxious fumes. Now, she mentions that it's the the Oracle of Whimsy.
No, it's the Oracle of Delphi.
The Oracle of Delphi.
The Oracle
Did you do any research on that?
No, I did not do the research on the Oracle of Delphi.
I looked into it a little bit. The Oracle of Delphi is actually Pythia.
Oh, Pythia.
Okay, Pythia.
Good old Pythia.
Good old Pythia. Okay, so Pythia was known to be the oracle of wherever this area of ancient Greece was, and people would come to Pythia and they would look for her advice on things like when to start a war or when to plant crops.
Okay.
But her messages were often considered unreliable, which is something I think we need to keep in our head.
Okay.
But they did say that she would often go to these caves where there were like gases coming out, fumes of the chasm that would maybe put her in this state. And so that is the state that Lottie is trying to get Akilah to. And it is interesting because, again, that plays into what we've seen with Travis in the adult timeline as well. When he goes to have the auto asphyxiation, he's trying to connect with it. The nature spirit, what have you. Now, I wanted to mention something earlier. We were talking about Ty and Van, and they had that sacrifice of the rabbit. Did you notice how quickly the wilderness came swooping in after that?
Oh, yeah.
It was immediate. It was literally within seconds we saw the rustling of the trees and the grasses and all that stuff.
There was a little bit of screaming. Maybe trees. I don't know. There's some noise anyway.
Oh, that's right. They did say maybe we should tune into the screaming trees.
Yeah. So
by the way, we don't have the poll results officially, but we will post them this coming week. The poll last week was, do you think the screaming trees are simply just search and rescue helicopters that the Yellowjackets are ignoring? So I'll post those soon. Maybe by the time I edit this, I'll have that on the screen right now. Do I have it there, Doug? Can you see them?
I don't see it.
But what does Akilah see when she knocks out?
Oh, well, this is very interesting. She's walking on a giant Ben, but Ben...
She's at the gorge.
She's at the gorge, looking over the gorge, and then all of a sudden, it's a giant Coach Ben, and he's sprawling across the gorge, but in the distance, there's like city lights and activity, civilization.
And she says, when it is revealed, what she saw, she didn't feel fear in that. She didn't feel fear in walking across Coach Ben's back to get there. It's very interesting.
She said he's the bridge.
He's the bridge.
He's the bridge.
So this happens in the cave. She comes to. There's a moment where you think maybe we're going to lose Akilah, which I
thought she was dead.
I think we all had a fear that might happen.
I thought she was dead. And then, of course, she must get enough oxygen. She comes back.
Yeah.
And her eyes are kind of all knocked back or whatever.
Right.
But
so she says this to Lottie and Travis as to what she saw. And then, of course, we flash to, again, the firing squad. And at just the right moment.
Right before they're getting ready to shoot
right before
Coach
other
Ben.
Ty, who's really good at hiding the fact that she's other Ty or whatever. Travis pushes Coach Ben out of the way. Now, this is really great, okay? Because in the synopsis, would you like to read the synopsis of this episode?
Give it to me. Okay. The Yellowjackets confront the reality of having to pull an old Yeller. Lottie mentors a new up-and-coming prophet.
So, Old Yeller. Do you remember it?
Well, I think I've seen it, but I have no recollection except it's about a dog.
I read the book when I was a kid. And it is, yes, it's a children's book. It's a coming-of-age story about how this kid named Travis.
Oh, how interesting, huh?
Has this dog that kind of comes into the family's life, and he's kind of a pest at first, but I guess he helps the family through certain things. But then at one point when he's trying to protect the family, he gets bit by a wolf. And so at that point, they consider the dog to have rabies. And so, unfortunately, Travis has to put down that dog.
That's coming back to me now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember this.
So it's really interesting because in this scenario, the Old Yeller they reference in the synopsis is Coach Scott. And in the end, it is Travis who actually saves Coach Ben. Now, let's talk about the symbolism of the dream. Okay, Lottie and Akilah are there to tell everybody, oh, no, we cannot do this. He is our bridge home. He is the one that is going to
save us.
And they all kind of like, oh, my God. But what do you really think about that? Because they're walking over his back to get to safety.
I don't know if that has. I mean, he almost looks like a, like that character that
Gulliver,
Gollum, Gulliver's Travels or something. So I don't know. I wouldn't take it that he was dead when they were doing that. They just think that. I mean, let's face it. He has a lot of good information.
Yes, he does have a lot of good information.
So,
but what is his place going to be when it becomes this society of two tribes where they're doing all this crazy stuff? That's the question.
I don't know.
In other words, do they have to walk on his back to get to that? Well, again, this is where I think possibly we're going back to what we mentioned at the very beginning of the episode, which is this Javi's friend. Because if Javi's friend, who may or may not be the daughter of the cabin daddy who perished, was in the cave talking to Coach Ben, then Coach Ben knows that there's somebody out there who is this survivalist, and that person is potentially their way out.
Right.
So he is the bridge, literally.
He is the bridge to
possibly
getting out of there.
What do you think?
Remember, he had all the maps drawn out. So, I mean, he's definitely the best person that they could have.
The most prepared.
They needed somebody a little older on their side.
Yes.
They should keep him around.
I think so.
Well, I guess they are going to keep him around.
At least for another episode.
Well, at least for another episode. But, of course, you know, Coach Ben is not shot, and he is saved. However, the final scene...
The dynamic duo
of Melissa and Shauna show up, and Shauna makes Melissa slice his ankle. I think people think that this is going to make him immobile completely. Like, forever.
Yeah.
Like, so he's just going to be like an oracle himself, right? He's not going to be able to do much.
Yeah.
So,
at first I thought they were like trying to get his whole foot. Or, you know, maybe, again, this concept we had thought maybe they're going to, like, eat him limb by limb. I mean, let's talk about Sean and Melissa for a moment, because there was an earlier scene with them where Melissa comes to Shauna, who is sharpening her knife as the butcher.
Yes, I was a little worried when I saw that, too. I was like, okay.
She is a real beast.
We knew that knife was going to come out later, didn't we?
Yes, exactly. It's like, again, foreshadowing. Like, the weapon is in the episode. It is going to show up later on. So Melissa has a little bouquet of, like, colorful berries, kind of like our little bouquet here, right? And then also she has a sheath for that knife, and she's stitched an S on there. So she's obviously showing that she is attracted. She has feelings for
I
Shauna.
wanted to know, where did she get the leather to make that?
Well, it's from some other animal that they killed.
Okay.
So Shauna immediately is questioning, like, why are you doing this? Like, why do you even like me? And Melissa says something like, well, I always saw how Jackie walked all over you, and all these other people seem to walk all over you from before. And now it is very apparent that you are no longer anybody's doormat. And she also likes the fact that Shauna is not afraid of showing her dark side. So then later, when Shauna sort of employs Melissa to the task of slicing Coach Scott's ankle, and Melissa's kind of shying away from it, then Shauna's like, hey, don't you remember what you said? You wanted to be in touch with your darker side. So she cuts him, and he is wailing.
He's just screaming.
And we don't really know what the intention is.
Yeah.
But then they go back to the camp, and
you still hear him screaming.
You hear him wailing. And then she's got this look on her face, and so I don't know who says it. It says something like, oh, gosh, well, you don't have to enjoy it so much.
Yeah,
clearly
might have been Natalie, I think, who said that.
Yeah,
but it was very disturbing because but I guess we knew that he wasn't dead. I almost thought for a moment, I'm like, God, I hope he doesn't bleed out.
Right.
But I guess it's not a fatal.
Right.
They're gonna keep him around.
Right. Well, he probably has the wherewithal, even in that state, to be able to kind of wrap up the wound with whatever he's wearing, maybe, because again, he is the smartest guy out there when it comes to this stuff, probably. Now, going back to him pleading for his life, that was such a harrowing scene. They put a burlap sack over his head because they cannot watch that moment when they actually shoot him, and he's like, no, you guys have to see my face. You need to see what you're doing here, because he's saying all these wonderful things that should have made a difference to people. Like, this is me. It's me.
Yeah,
you don't have to do this.
Yeah, and I think he was just trying to plead with them that, like, you guys, you don't have to become this thing. You don't have to do this. Clearly, they are gung-ho and they're doing it. So at least we can thank Lottie and Akilah for saving him.
Yeah, there's that moment that even meek little Jen says, you don't deserve.
Yeah, that was weird.
Moment.
She came out. She was like, oh, okay. Now, did you notice this, though? We heard a voice in his head, and it sounded like the boyfriend, Paul.
Yeah, I think it was. He said something like "come home" or something. Isn't that what he said?
Come home.
And it was in the moment where they had gone to the duck pen or whatever to get him for the firing squad. And if you notice, he was cuddling the goat, and he hadn't even eaten his last meal.
Right, his meal was still there.
It was so sad.
Now, I don't know if this would be the time to talk about any kind of conspiracy theories that I've been seeing, but I saw one that pertained a little bit to this Paul.
Okay.
One person was suggesting, it was mentioned, the terrible things that we did when we got back.
Yes.
What if Ben makes it back and he is murdered by the girls because of the secrets?
Or a girl.
Or somebody murders him, and maybe the person who's stalking is Paul getting revenge. I mean, that's kind of a cool thing.
There was somebody who had said that there was somebody in the background of Natalie's funeral in episode 1 could have been Paul.
Okay.
I guess in a way I could see that being a thing because, like we say, they never really put any of this stuff in there for no reason. There's so many things. There's so many of these little moments, whether it's the crystal, whether it's the Javi's friend, all these little bits and pieces they've got sprinkled all over that could come to fruition.
Yeah, there was another thing that, well, I think you took note of it too. I sent it over to you, was the drawings. It's probably on Yellowjackets Blood Hive. Somebody had posted multiple pictures of Javi's drawings. And then there were the tattoo on Adam's back. And they all look very similar.
This is really, really interesting because if we all go back to season 1 and the hysteria that the show created, everybody thought that Adam Martin was Javi grown up. And then I always thought there's no way that could be the case because Shauna would still know that this was Javi. Like, you don't spend all that time in the wilderness with somebody and then not know in their eyes that it's the same person. Like, it's just not possible. But it does beg the question, why are those tattoos so similar to these drawings? Down to very certain elements of the drawings.
Well, did I mention this other thing before or not? I don't know if I've mentioned it in the podcast, but what if Adam Martin is related to Travis and Javi? If you recall, at the beginning of Yellowjackets, when they talked about the reason why the father had some marital problems or something.
Yes.
So let's just say, for shits and giggles, what if there was another child that was born?
And what I love about it is that the guy's name is Adam Martin, which Martin is shortened of Martinez.
Oh, right. Well, see, then maybe, I don't know. So that's another one. It could be another thing.
It's another thing that is a possibility, a really intriguing possibility, that he would have had the magazine about the 25th anniversary. Yeah. He would have had the book, the expose, if he was maybe a sibling of Javi and Travis. Very interesting.
This is going into some Reddit territory, isn't it?
Very interesting.
It's getting down to Reddit still.
Speaking of Reddit theories and all this stuff, let's talk about the trajectory of the rest of this season. There have been some new synopses that have dropped. There is one, I can't remember the exact episode, where it does literally say that in the current timeline, a former teammate resurfaces.
Right.
So this is happening. We don't know who it is.
Well, we think it's going to be the Hillary Swank.
We think that,
but we don't know.
Because in the synopsis, it also says something like, and it really ticks off Shauna or something like that.
Okay.
So that makes sense.
Well, that's why
there.
we still hope it's going to be Melissa.
Yeah, that seems to make the most sense. But of course, we've got all of these other now suspects of who is following him, which I think is great. Now, the other thing that we need to talk about is that the titles for the last 2 episodes have been revealed as How the Story Ends.
Oh.
And the last one is called Full Circle.
Oh, interesting.
That feels very end of times. Could this be the last season of Yellowjackets?
No, they said it's going to be 5 seasons.
They have said that. In fact, even at the beginning of this season, I think Bart had said, they were asked whether or not Juliette Lewis was going to be a part of this season in any way, shape, or form. And he said, no, it doesn't seem like that's something we're going to do this season, but we are always considering that for the future. So we still don't know. It hasn't been greenlit for a 4th season. So it does leave me wondering, though, what's going on here. There are also rumors that we will actually see the rescue in this season.
Oh, cool.
Now, just because we're seeing the rescue doesn't mean that we're not going to go back to the wilderness in future seasons if it carries on. But they may show the rescue in order to tell the story of whatever they're telling, right? What's going on when they get back. Maybe they need to get to that, and the only way to get to that is to show the rescue. Because we don't know. Are they going to actually get to the pit girl and all that stuff, the tribes and the winter and all that? There have been some scenes in the trailer where it does show them in some of those costumes. So I think we're getting there. I just don't know. These are all leftover questions. It is funny. I want to just point this out. I found this book today in our library.
I found it
in our library.
I found it on the street.
Oh, well, I love that. I love that.
Yeah, of course.
Anyway, it's called Wilderness Areas of North America. When I opened it earlier, I turned right to the page where they had literally had the wilderness areas of British Columbia.
Well, that is just a synchronicity, isn't it?
Weird. Anyway, will they be discovered? How will they be discovered?
It wanted you to go there.
It wanted it.
It wanted it.
It wanted it. All right. We've covered pretty much everything except for one scene. We need to go back.
A big scene.
We need to go back to Mr. Matthews' penthouse apartment because there is a scene where Shauna walks into Lottie's bedroom and she scans the area. It's great because there's a couple of photographs on the table we've never seen before. And oddly, they got some Extrajackets in them. One of them is Proto Crystal. That's actually the shot that appears in the intro, and Proto Crystal's in there. You know, it's all kind of jittery, the footage, but the photograph is there. She's on the left side of the photo next to Lottie, I think. And then there's another shot where it's the early Jen, I think also with Lottie, which I thought was interesting that we have the new Jen, the current Jen in season 3, and then the old Jen is in the photograph, but whatever.
I thought it was really sweet to see the photos there to show that, you know, Lottie did love these people.
Yes.
You know, like that is her.
There was a connection.
That was the thing. And I think that was what was interesting about the scene, the way it kind of unfolded too, because what happens is the father comes in and sees Shauna, but he in his mind.
It's the back side of Shauna.
Right. Yeah. But what he is seeing is he thinks it's Lottie. So he starts talking to her as Lottie. What was really interesting was you saw the fact that Shauna was okay playing.
She kind of cloaks
right.
Lottie for
playing
him.
the part of Lottie for the father to almost like give him some closure.
Yeah.
Because he's talking about how they didn't always get along.
And he's showing that he has some forgiveness for her, showing again, explaining how he doesn't really understand her illness, which he never did when she was a child. Remember? He was the one who was like, didn't want to believe that she had the visions, right? It was the mother who believed that. So there was that disconnect. And so Shauna is able to give this man, have him feel good about this. They even hug, don't they?
They do. She hugs him, and it's very sweet. But I also thought what was really heartfelt about it, at this point, Shauna can actually see why Lottie was what she was dealing with.
Yeah.
You know, so almost in a way like it's a forgiveness.
That's a good
kind of
interpretation. Thing. There's another interpretation that I saw it as in the whole sequence was this guilt? Was this guilt? Did Shauna kill Lottie? Are we going to find out that Shauna killed Lottie?
Maybe.
And in this moment, she's like, oh my gosh, I have killed this man's daughter.
I guess you could take it that way too. Well, whatever it was, you can see that it was definitely heartfelt.
Yeah, and it was a nice way to bring up the character of Lottie and her mental illness. Let's talk about Simone Kessell, who there was an article that came out from Collider where this person talks about how devastated they were that we've lost adult Lottie in episode 4 of this season. And I think Simone Kessell posted about it, and she said, I agree with a lot of what this article says. And basically the article talks about how, you know, it's a real missed opportunity for the adult character to show some redemption because, you know, and even us, I have to admit, we were loving Simone Kessell's performance playing this in such a delicious way that she's still a little crazy. But there would have
She was giving me Mashila, you know.
There would have been opportunity to show this character kind of push past that mental illness, maybe if she had had the right kind of support and the right kind of treatment, and she never got it. And so it is quite sad, but I think you have to keep reminding the bigger picture here of what this show is about. And I do think it has something to do with what we said last week, which is that the wilderness or the darkness or whatever is never going to be satisfied until these people are all dead because they're all living on borrowed time. Even if they have mental illness, they're trying to right their past wrongs or whatever, they still got to die, unfortunately.
Now, I did do a little bit of digging to because, you know, we talked about this another time that you reminded me that Simone Kessell had been in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show that we watched. Yeah. And she played, was it Princess Leia's mother?
Well, her known mother at the time, right? Because Princess Leia is actually the daughter of Padme Amidala.
And so I went back in actually just look at the photos and I was like, oh my God, that's right. Because I remember we really were into her.
Oh, like,
who's she?
Yeah.
You know, so that was before Yellowjackets.
They live on Alderaan, if you remember.
Was it
Star Wars
around well, it would have been maybe the first season of Yellowjackets. I don't know.
It could have been right around that same time.
But I mean, we hadn't seen Simone Kessell yet.
Yeah.
But anyway, I thought that was interesting. But I did a little bit of digging.
Oh, is this our Untying the Knot?
Could be the Untying the Knot.
Well, the Untying the Knot, if you didn't know, is a segment in which we take deep dives into a specific production aspect of the series, or perhaps provide a bio of a fan favorite cast member. And we thought, since we don't have Simone Kessell in this episode. Well, she was there in a couple of gory post-murder photographs. We thought we'd shine the spotlight on this fantastic, engaging actress.
Yes,
Doug?
And you know what was really interesting is she is half Maori. Okay. Well, we know she's from New Zealand. She was born in Auckland to a Maori mother of Ngati Tuarati and Ngai Te Rangi descent.
Yeah,
okay?
you butchered that just as well as Shauna would have butchered it.
Right. And then her father was of European descent. Her debut was in 1992 as part of this, I guess it's an Australian soap opera. It's called Homeward Bound. So she started acting in 92. But what's interesting is, she did a bunch of Xena warrior princesses.
Really?
Yeah, but different characters.
Oh, interesting.
But I was looking at that and thought, oh, wow, okay. I mean, she must have been pretty young. She started working in like early-ish mid-90s. So she's been doing a lot. One of the things recently she's done this horror revenge film. Remember, we were trying to find this. It's called Hard Home. So this was done in 2024. And it's a story about a mother who is deeply sad and lures her daughter's killer into her smart home in order to take revenge and gets involved in a distorted game. So I thought that was really...
Sounds very Yellowjackets.
Yes. I'm not sure where she lives now. I'm trying to think.
I know where she lives. I saw somewhere that she lives in Sydney.
Oh,
now.
Okay. That makes sense. But she's done some CSI Miami was another one here in America, at least. Wonderland, is that one that was done
Wonderland,
here?
that's a popular series, I think. Yeah.
Okay. And then, of course, Yellowjackets. And then this was interesting. There's an upcoming series called The Last Frontier. And it's not announced yet when it's coming out. Okay. But that's the newest thing she's done. So
great.
So
good.
We're going to see more of her.
I really, really have enjoyed her performance. And as I say, I think we will see her again maybe in episode 10.
I'm just sad we haven't got to meet her. I'd love to meet her. She seems so cool.
She does seem really, really cool. Yeah. She's got that presence, I think, more so than anybody else on the series who are not really allowed to be glamorous or showy. So I've enjoyed that. Now, do you think, this is another thing we haven't really discussed, Callie was not in this episode.
Yeah, that was strange.
So do you think we're going to see like a Callie Lottie reunion? I certainly hope so.
Oh, maybe we'll get a dream sequence or a spiritual.
Maybe Callie's part of what happens.
Right.
In the end
maybe
there.
She's there. Maybe she's, like I said, maybe she's the recipient of the money is what I keep thinking.
Yeah.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's going to be a tie-in.
Yeah.
But maybe she was just giving her $50,000 so she could go out and buy that red dress rather than steal it.
Or take over Sunshine Honey.
Yeah, maybe she's the new Sunshine Honey girl.
Yeah.
Do you like honey?
Do you like honey like I like honey?
Do you like honey like I like honey? Comes to Sunshine Honey.
Well, thank you for providing that background on Simone Kessell.
You are most welcome.
And now we are going to come in for a landing on this episode to get right down to the lotus point. This is our gauge of how highbrow or lowbrow this individual episode of Yellowjackets was. So, Doug, what did you rate this episode of Yellowjackets?
Well, so between 1 and 5, I guess this is the thing. A lot of the episode was highbrow, but a lot of it was not highbrow. So it's going to have to be an average. So let's give it a 3.
Okay, 3.
Yeah,
all right.
I think 3.
I can dig it. I gave mine a 3.5. This is mostly for the performances I felt from Sammy Hanratty and Steven Kruger and even Liv Hewson and Jasmine Savoy Brown in those moments, because I think there was a lot of good material that they had there and they had to kind of flip on a dime several times. So, and that sequence, that harrowing sequence of Coach Scott pleading for his life. That's given me the 3.5 there.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. All right, well, let's look ahead to next week, shall we? Doug, what is happening next week?
Next week on Seaview Circle, Yellowjackets Season 3, Episode 6, Thanksgiving, Canada. The Yellowjackets start turning on each other faster than a reality TV reunion special. The Sadecki family vacation features a vending machine and a deep dive into questionable parenting choices. Misty uncovers an incriminating clue. Ooh, that sounds good.
What's the vending machine? It's
I
so
don't
weird.
know. Sounds like an episode of Twilight Zone to me.
Maybe.
One of those
I tell
weird,
you, their synopses, they always are like red herrings. They're full of all this stuff that like happens but kind of totally twisted, so I can never really trust these.
Yeah.
One thing I think we can trust is that it's called Thanksgiving Canada. So the Canadian Thanksgiving actually takes place in October. I think it's like maybe the second week of October. So that's going to show maybe a time jump because we've been in summer. So that's interesting.
It's going to start getting cold again.
Yeah, we're getting back to that. I also did a little bit of research just on Canadian Thanksgiving. It definitely has its roots in Europe and specifically maybe in some French traditions. So I was wondering if maybe this is an opportunity for them to sprinkle in that cabin daddy stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, the only thing I can say is, though, if some time has gone on, I want to know how long is Coach Ben's hair going to be? Is he going to be like down to here? It's going to be like a total mountain man.
In a couple months? No, it doesn't grow that fast.
At least
Well, I guess only time will tell, figuratively and literally. So stay hungry, friends, and we will see you then back on the sack. Have a great week. Thanks for joining us.